Has your network been breached? Cybereason can help you answer this question. Cybereason products hunt for threats within your network and eliminate them in real time. To Cybereason, real time means within seconds. Founded by former military hackers who don't play by the rules, they've built this experience into their platform. Harness ingenuity and imagination, not just code, to defeat attackers. Cybereason, disrupt the adversary and let the hunt begin. Signal Sciences is the industry's first web protection platform that works in any cloud, any container, any platform as a service, and any modern application architecture. The Signal Sciences web protection platform can be deployed in next-generation WAF, RASP, or reverse proxy modes, giving customers ultimate flexibility and coverage. Protect your web applications with Signal Sciences web protection platform. Signal Sciences, protecting applications, connecting teams. For more information, check them out at signalsciences.com/PSW. The average time between being hacked and realizing you've been hacked is 1 year. Can you afford to let an intruder roam your network for that long? Can your company weather the fallout when this comes to light? Black Hills Information Security can find the bad guys in your network and train you to do it yourself. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a hunt teaming engagement can help you find a persistent threat in your network. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is the security news discussion for today. I don't think I have any more announcements. We're done with announcements. We're ready to jump right into it. It's interesting. I started doing DNS administration pretty early on in my career, and I quickly found that once you have that on your resume as like you've done a DNS project, you become the DNS guy or gal in the organization, and wherever you go, that follows you. And they're like, oh, yeah, like our DNS is a mess. Could you clean that up? And
it's black magic.
In some places, there was a bigger mess than others. You know, those organizations that have been around longer that didn't have a DNS guy or gal in the organization had a bigger mess. And I was always the person that was happy to clean it up. And even so to this day in the studio, like I still manage the DNS. Everyone's like, we need to update. Yeah, I'm like, I'm there. I got it. But recently, it seems to be a resurgence, and I don't know if it was the Dyn attack or the handful or more than a handful of vulnerabilities that Google just disclosed in DNS Mask. What's fueling kind of this DNS security or insecurity kind of mantra that we've been hearing lately? And it just seems to be like there's an article that I put in the show notes from Dark Reading Room where Paul Vixie, who's been on the show before, Vixie Cron, right? Awesome guy. And DNS is a victim of its own success. And of course, we've talked a lot about DNS security on the show over the years. And certainly it's one of those technologies that early on, obviously was never designed for security.
Yep.
And now it seems like there was kind of a lull. And now all of a sudden everyone's interested in DNS security. And I'm like, can we just stop for a minute? Like, we've had this technology for a really long time. And we've had the security problem of DNS for a really long time. Why are we now just like making a big deal? Like, I feel like we should have figured it out by now. And obviously we haven't, because of those handful of vulnerabilities in DNS Mask, 3 of them are remote code executions, Stack Overflows. One of the vulnerabilities is an ASLR bypass. DNS Mask is built into the larger percentage of IoT devices today. Every time I've worked with an IoT device, under the covers, it's DNS Mask. It's either the client or the server or both for that particular device. And Paul Vixie expects that more Mirai-type botnets to emerge as a result of these disclosures. And what I talked about earlier, previously this week on Hack Naked News, was that there's a good number of those IoT devices that are vulnerable that they're never going to get an update.
Never.
Ever.
Well, it's an ancient technology. So, I mean, BinD and all these tools have been around for as long as the Internet's been around.
BinD? You mean Bind?
You know, whichever one you want.
I kind of like BinD, though.
You never called it BinD?
I think we should create a campaign.
I've been calling it BinD forever and ever.
It's BinD,
so, BinD. And that thing's been around. I mean, it was designed in the 70s. It's been around forever. There's vulnerabilities in it, and people use so many different versions of it because they get their code up and running, and they use some version of those tools, and they're there. And then the other piece of it is people pushing their DNS into the cloud. So they're pushing it off-site into cloud-based services. And as they do that, I think, again, they kind of use that. We were talking earlier about that security blanket feeling you get from Active Directory and things like that. Now it's kind of like, well, it's not my responsibility. I just need to push this A record in and I'm good to go. And you say, I'll let somebody else worry about those vulnerabilities, but they're all still out there. And as people build devices, they're not thinking about those kind of, they just can't think in that stacked mindset of, this leads to this, leads to this, leads to this. And way out there is where the vulnerability is coming back down to where I am. And it's just really hard to think like that.
It's interesting. If you go back to episode 501 of Paul Security Weekly, we interviewed David Conrad of ICANN. And in previous roles, David has led the Bind DNS software team and was there when the TSIG vulnerability was introduced. My first paper in really real, or as close to real as it got for me at the time, was researching the TSIG vulnerability in Bind. David was the manager of the project ISC Bind at the time and managed the developer who introduced that vulnerability and introduced the fix for that vulnerability. I need to circle back with David, and I want an introduction to that person, because really, if it wasn't for that vulnerability, I would have probably never researched it and really fallen in love truly with security at the time. And it kind of catapulted my career in security, was a vulnerability in DNS. And here we are 16 years later, or whatever it is. I think, actually that was probably 16 years ago. Here we are. And
I think you're very right about saying that none of these IoT devices, who are vulnerable to these kinds of attack, is going to be updated. And
because the manufacturer's not going to make.
They're not.
But here's the thing, Ron. They're going to, even if they do produce a patch, like Netgear just fixed 50 vulnerabilities as a part of most of it was part of their bug bounty program. They're going to fix those vulnerabilities. Who's going to update them?
No one. Nobody knows even. Nobody is aware that there's a toaster that needs to be updated somewhere. It's not. And that, I think that kind of thinking is what gives a lot of, we are seeing now in the last year or so, the kind of vigilante attitude in several gray hat hackers in the community, saying that we should actively patch or even brick IoT devices.
So when I was researching the TSIG vulnerability, do you remember the worm that came about as a result of that? That was in an attempt to fix that? Oh, so you do malware history. This is a worm history question for you, Ron.
I don't remember that.
I'm going to stump the expert. I only know it
that's from memory, but we saw only last.
The lion worm. You remember the lion worm? Oh, so you have to do an episode on the lion worm.
I'll check it out.
I'll come on and be a pseudo expert in it.
No problem.
It was 16 years since I've looked at it, but it was
a worm that tried to patch a vulnerability.
It tried to patch the vulnerability. Max Vision, who later I think was charged with something. Maybe it was that he was charged with, convicted, did work for the FBI, didn't want to do work for the FBI, and then was sent to prison. I think that's the whole story. And I could be wrong, so listeners, please. Again, it was 16 years ago. My memory's a little fuzzy now in my old age. But the lion worm was a result of the TSIG vulnerability. Its mission was to go fix those. And I had pulled down some of the original exploit code for the TSIG vulnerability that actually worked. There were several copies out there that were purposely, they had made a couple of changes in the code to make it not work. I had the copy that was an actual functioning copy. And actually, Judy Novak at the time contacted me. She was writing a book and wanted access to that source code. And I gave her access to that, so I'm quoted in the book because I had did. And again, this is an event. There's so many things happened as a result that really catapulted me into the security industry, because I was like, this is so freaking cool. It is just so awesome. And I'm like,
the notion of a good worm is not new, but it's always very risky.
Yeah.
And I think that no security researcher in his right mind would probably say that it's a good idea, because it takes so little to have a system connected to some mission critical application, like a medical or something, and you think that you're doing good, you're patching something bad, and you are one bit off something, or the configuration is not what you expected, because you can't test every configuration of everything on Earth.
And you crash the system.
And you crash the system.
But then, much to our Stuxnet and nation-state hacking discussion, your code is out there. And while your intention was to fix all of those systems,
Somebody takes that
someone
code.
takes that code and goes, "Oh, this is." If people had access to the version, I think one of the reasons the code disappeared from the internet is because it was a really easy to exploit vulnerability for that TSIG vulnerability, and people were doing bad things with it. And some of my friends would ask me, and I'm like, "No, dude, I am not giving you that code. Like, no way am I sharing this code out. Like, it was taken down from the internet for a reason, and you're not getting it. You're not. Judy got it. Judy got a copy." But, like, no one else got a copy. Like, that was it. I was like, nope, you're all cut off. Like, no way, because you're going to go do bad things with it. I just know.
And we're going to blame Paul.
Yeah. We're like, oh, yeah, I got the code from Paul. I'm like, oh, God,
It's the Paul
And
worm.
history repeating itself because now we've got the Bricker bot.
And we've got Mirai. Mirai releases source code.
Bricker bot actually goes one IoT device at a time and bricks it, completely bricks it, destroys it. You can't reboot it or even factory reset it. It completely because the hacker who wrote it says we can't trust the user to update his devices.
But it doesn't.
So let's kill it.
It doesn't actually destroy the hardware.
Not the hardware, but you
just can't get back into it.
It erases the
ROM that holds the firmware.
The ROM,
right.
exactly. Even you have to rewrite
or
the
the
ROM.
flash. Well, it's
or
the
flash, something like that.
ROM is read only, but the flash you can rewrite. But
in that case,
might mean, and it depends on the device. Well, actually, most devices, if your flash is wiped out, you have to solder or hope that there's a JTAG connector. If there's not one, you have to solder a JTAG connector on there or some other kind of thing to rewrite the firmware.
It's practically brick because nobody's going to do something
the average person's not going to
do it. For a
some of
device
us, we might be like, let's break out the soldering iron and reconstruct.
Exactly.
Wow, we could start a business repairing IoT brick devices with like a soldering
iron. Well, because
iron.
basically it goes back to your examples, Ron, of malware that wipes out the BIOS. When you overwrite the flash of an IoT device, what you have to understand, right, is that the bootloader or the BIOS is actually part of like that flash chip. It's all on one chip. So the BIOS, the kernel, the file system, the operating system, userland is all on the same physical chip. So if you can just rewrite that whole chip, it's not going to do anything until you then go in and rebuild it. When you wipe firmware off a device, the BIOS is still there. It's actually an IP stack in many. It depends on the device, but many have an IP stack built in that will like listen on TFTP. Like a Linksys router, we wrote a book on hacking Linksys routers. Linksys routers would listen on a TFTP and listen for new firmware, so you could recover,
flash it again
over the network. Right. But if you wiped out that entire flash chip with the Bricker bot, dude, you're soldering something on that device.
If it doesn't have TFTP or BootP or something sitting there that you can talk to it
with.
Well,
even some devices, if you just wipe out the firmware and leave, if that BIOS or that bootloader doesn't have a mechanism to recover,
there has to be some kind of interface.
You wipe out that
yeah.
bootloader, like forget it. You have to rebuild the entire flash chip, which means you're soldering something under the board to transfer that over serial or JTAG to be able to.
Now that $49 sex toy just doesn't seem worth it.
It doesn't do anything anymore. It's just a static device.
Internet-connected grill, something like that,
My IoT dildo doesn't work anymore.
We did an interview on that.
I read something about there is some kind of a sex toy connected to the internet.
No, there's all kinds of them. They did a whole show on it.
Several? I haven't researched.
They did a show on it.
Maybe I should really do some research.
Renderman has a project called the Internet of Dongs. And he has a whole case. Like he opens up this entire case. There are hundreds of sex toys on the market.
What kind of things you can do with an internet connected?
It connects to your smartphone, and you can remotely with your partner do things. Is the
dill drone? It flies in and comes after you.
Well, and someone showed me an article that you can like detect who has sex toys based on their Bluetooth signature. It was doing like Bluetooth war driving of sex toys. Did you see that article?
There was an article about it yesterday. It was in the New York Times or something where they were talking about people war driving sex toys, and they were using it to actually compromise like the home network because they were going in through the sex toy and then breaking out of that into the house.
The sex toy goes in.
So you're saying that the sex toy penetrated the system?
Exactly.
Well, they used the sex toy to penetrate the system.
It was the most graphic pen test ever done. I mean, it was like people were like screaming with pleasure while the pen test was going on.
That gives a whole new meaning to the penetration testing.
And threat vector and like the thrust of research.
We could go all night with kind of
render. It definitely doesn't take me that long. But Render was on what
Wasn't that long
episode?
ago.
It wasn't
Yeah.
that long ago.
I was I here? I think I was here then. No, I missed that one. I was mad because
That was one not to be
I saw you're doing
missed.
Internet of Dongs. I watched it, but I wasn't on the show.
I don't remember what episode he was on, but he was on an episode and talked about it. And actually, there's a lot of privacy concerns. There's a lot of kind of social concerns. It basically, Renderman was like looking into cases where like it's considered rape in some cases if you take over someone's sex toy. Like there are some serious issues with these devices being internet connected. So talk about IoT and some of the issues with that.
You redirect Stuxnet at the sex toys and cause them to overload or go into overdrive, and it's just like
I was talking with.
I wonder if you could do spear phishing specifically for a single dong.
That's
like,
right.
I want to get this guy when he's using. No, I won't go that route.
Renderman was great though when he came on the show. Like he really was immune to like our jokes because I couldn't help but make jokes, but he was really like immune to
heard
it.
it 1,000 times.
Yeah, and
probably.
he heard it 1,000 times, and like after a while, like I wasn't able to get a reaction out of him like early on in the interview, and I'm like, all right, we'll have the discussion. Like he basically socially engineered us into acting more like
serious
adults,
discussion,
a serious discussion, and it was one of my favorite episodes.
It was a great show, and I agree. I was watching that. I was thinking he's actually trying to keep them from being juvenile about this whole thing.
I talked about the DerbyCon. I'm like, dude, you did a great job in doing that.
Talking to Dr. Ruth or somebody where, everybody's making cracks about it.
Yes.
No, the orgasm
He is the Dr.
just an
Ruth.
orgasm.
He's probably had a lot of experience because
Ruth
every show he's on, all the hosts are now immediately turning into 13 years old teenagers.
Exactly.
So he has to keep being responsible grown up, right?
Yeah. So we appreciate him for doing that research because, I mean, it's interesting. We talked about it. Well, we talked about it like a lot of folks don't want to talk about that as an issue, right? And there are some serious security issues with these devices. So we're glad he's doing that research and keeping the rest of us from going down the rabbit hole. I do want to talk about the article where, or the issue, and then the subsequent articles I was reading about Alex Stamos. I don't know Alex. I know he's been in is one of the in the security community, but he's attended a Black Hat and DEF CON for a while and held positions at various organizations. He's the current CSO of Facebook. Alex, if you're listening, I sent you a Facebook request. Love to have you on the show. I love everything I've been reading and everything I've heard about Alex. I don't know Alex personally, but he is working on hunting down the Russians who worked to trick Facebook into allowing Facebook to run ads that reportedly affected the political climate in the election here in the U.S.
What do you mean tricked? Were they not using
I say tricked because
normal everyday ad campaign interface of Facebook?
And there are many, many restrictions. I know because we take out Facebook ads for a number of our shows, right? And as you know, Ron, there are restrictions. You can't have a certain percentage of text.
Right.
If your advertisement is of a certain type and displays certain types of content, Facebook will not let you. One of our other, as Doug and I sit here and smoke cigars, one of our only non-security related podcast is about cigars. It's called The Stogie Geeks. You can go to stogiegeeks.com and listen to that podcast. If you're on Facebook, you're not going to see an ad for Stogie Geeks because it's tobacco related, and that's in their filters. It doesn't. I'm not selling cigars. I'm not selling tobacco-related products.
Just mentioning cigars.
I want to mention cigars so that people who are, and I can target it. I can target it to people who are over, I can say 21, because some states and towns actually have a law that says to use tobacco products, you got to be 21. So I can say, look, to see our ad, you got to be 21. You have to have an interest in cigars. So I don't even care if who you are. If you're 21, you have an interest in cigars, I want you to see our ad. Even if I do that, Facebook says nope, can't run the ad because it's promoting tobacco products. Like one time, it was a picture of me and a very, very famous founder and of a tobacco company that I just wanted to show that he was here in the studio and we took a picture together. And they were like, nope. You're associated with cigars.
I don't like
you
about
can't
Facebook.
Take out ads.
I think they are very tyrannical in their approach toward imposing their moral norms.
I completely agree.
Us.
We could have a whole. Oh, believe me, now you got me. Now you got me riled up, Ron.
Get it up.
So I can't take out ads because Facebook believes that I'm promoting the concept of tobacco in a positive light. However, somehow the Russians were able to take out ads and impact our election. And now Alex Stamos
And the
is looking at
content
this
of
issue.
these ads was something that is not allowed by Facebook because
Well,
I'm
it
not
shouldn't
aware
have
of
been,
any
but obviously it was.
political.
They took $100,000 from the Russians to run these ads. And Facebook
But
is
they
not
weren't
happy
promoting
about it.
Russian tobacco products.
Yeah, if the Russians were trying to sell cigars, like Facebook
They would have been
like,
blocked like
blocked
that. But,
instantly.
you want to sell a political candidate, that's a whole different.
Alex-
I mean, I think it just.
Alex is so not accepting my Facebook request.
Well, yeah, it's like you're off Facebook for
He's
good
like,
now.
that's it. You guys went off on a tangent now.
Well, I mean, I'll defend it a little bit. It's so difficult to discern between these different things, and it's like saying, we don't like tobacco because there's all these different rules and regs about it. But politics is a much more nebulous world, and saying they don't want to get into the world of saying, well, we're not going to let a political candidate advertise on Facebook because they have views we don't agree with, is really a very different thing from saying here's a person who's selling drugs or guns or whatever it is that they don't approve of. So I think you kind of got caught up in just a sort of a general category of things, whereas politics and things like that are much more nebulous and hard
I would
to
be
discern.
very surprised if buying the ads entailed some sort of hack into Facebook systems or
I
whatever.
don't think so. I think they
I
just
would
sold them the
probably
ad.
No, they just sold them. So
Sold
in the
ads.
article,
yeah, maybe they manipulated the wording a bit so that the automatic systems would
in
not
the article,
see. But
so Facebook is cooperating with a council that's put together in Congress, asking Facebook, who will testify later this fall. That's a testimony that I think we need to follow because I find this is it is a hack. Facebook states they had been gamed by foreign actors in an attempt to manipulate the election. The company Facebook disclosed that it had also sold more than $100,000 worth of political ads to Russian propagandists with the same goals, to influence the election.
I'm not surprised at all. I mean,
I kind of am, because I can't take out an ad to promote my cigar podcast, but the Russians can take out an ad to promote political propaganda.
Yeah, but it's so hard to discern what that really
Exactly.
means.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
then we get
it's
into
like if I'm-
machine learning and AI. How do they? How
Well,
is
even not
Facebook-
even
yeah.
that. I mean, if I go on Facebook and I say Hillary Clinton is good or Hillary Clinton is bad, how do I discern that one of those is true and one of those is false, and say this one's propaganda because Doug was paying or being paid by a lobbying firm to do it, and one of them shouldn't be allowed because it's a lie? Because it's very difficult, I think, to categorize. Whereas something like tobacco is just like we don't allow tobacco. And I mean, yeah, I know there's all these shades of gray there, but at the end, it's like I don't want gun ads on my site. Okay, so if you're anti-gun, you may get blocked, with your anti-gun ads. Just like, but it's not so
because
clear
there's a gun there.
when it gets into a message that's not. It's not a flat-out lie or it's not a flat-out truth. It's a political ad attempting to persuade people to do things. Not the same thing as advertising a product. It's a very convoluted mess.
I don't think they can ever hope to create a system that cannot be gamed in that way.
No.
That way, because it's too vague, even for a human. Let alone, I mean, there's no artificial intelligence right now who can even get close to what we're talking about. Even a human would have a hard time, I think, figuring out what to approve and what to
And where do you draw
prevent.
the line? Do you draw the line to say that I can't go in there and say, here's a question for you, is Barack Obama an American or not? I mean, okay, that.
Well, no, your ad's rejected because you use text. Too much text. 20%.
Yeah, that's easy.
20% text or more in a Facebook ad. It's
well, so
denied.
I got a picture of Barack Obama holding a Kenyan flag, no text at all.
There you go.
And
You're
the
good.
ad goes
You're
through.
good to go.
Okay, that could be just me, who's a crackpot. It could be me who truly believes that message, or I could be an evil propagandist from some other country who's trying to push that message.
My guess is that all this is an attempt by Facebook to make it seem as if it's trying to fix something or acknowledging that it's wrong in some way.
So you're not helping my case of getting Alex on the show, Ron. I mean, I don't disagree with you.
Please, Alex, please.
But I don't think Alex is going to come on the show now.
To spin the way that things are going as if we're trying to fix something when they know that actually they can't fix it.
Yeah.
They can't fix it.
So if you know Alex, or Alex, you're out there, we're begging you, man.
We really want you on
You
the
got to
show.
come on the show.
See how much they want you
Please,
here.
oh, please.
Oh, let's talk about the UK Home Secretary. that stated she doesn't know how encryption works. And I kind of feel like I'm picking on her, but there's a lot of interesting
Do
things.
any of our politicians know how encryptions work?
There's a lot of things in this article where she tries to explain herself about basically someone in a higher level political position, how much they need to understand about technology. Now, while part of me does want to defend politicians or people in this position, that technology is not like their first thing. Like, that's not why they're in office, because they're like really awesome programmer or understand technology or networking, and they have a Cisco certification, right? But on the flip side, I believe they have to have a fundamental understanding. Now, while I want to defend politicians and help educate everyone, that's the goal of our shows, is to educate everyone about issues of security, it becomes difficult to do that when, and what's her name? Hold on, let me get her name. The UK's Home Secretary Amber Rudd confused the difference between a hashtag and a hashing. And I think there's lines where I don't want to.
It's not fair toward her.
It's not. I don't want to fault Amber,
judging
right?
them too harshly,
Yeah.
because if, say that I tomorrow, for some unknown reason, would get nominated to be the Minister of Health of the UK, for example, would anyone expect me to know how to perform like an open heart surgery, or like see if I can identify melanoma cancer? No, I should probably understand budgeting and how to run a system. But none of when I was working for corporates, none of my like CEOs and CIOs, whatever, none of them knew how to actually program an FPGA device, for example.
But that's different. But that's different from confusing the topic of encryption with a social media hashtag.
Well,
like those are like apples and like baseball.
So I've worked with lots of politicians.
You have, yeah, Doug,
and I'll give you. There's good politicians and bad politicians in the sense that they know what they're supposed to be doing. Like Congressman Langevin, who just happens to represent Rhode Island, is a great guy.
Congressman Langevin knows the difference between encryption
but hang on.
and hashtag.
But I'll tell you
for
why.
sure.
But I'll tell you why he knows that. He knows the difference in that, not because he went out and worked in the industry, not because he went out and spent years.
He has
of
good
research.
advisors.
He has good advisors, and that's what a good politician does. A good politician surround. I've written those white papers for Sheldon Whitehouse. I've written those papers for Langevin, and those guys surround themselves with advisors because there's no way anyone
can know everything.
Right.
About
Steve Wozniak's not going to be able to be a great politician on his own. He can't sit there in a chair and say, no matter what, because these guys are getting asked to legislate not just security. They're getting asked healthcare, crime, military, all these things, and it goes from one bump, and so when they get caught out, and they're sort of working without a net, they don't have time to sit down and say, I need my person to write me a white paper, or I've got a headset in where they've got Doug and they've got Ron and they got Paul, they got all these other people going, okay, look, a hashtag is something you use on Twitter, and a hashing
is something to do with encryption.
And because if they could do that, they probably would. But when they have a chance, and if they're good politicians, when they're legislating, when they're actually sitting down to draw up legislation or make decisions about legislation, that's when they're calling me or Paul or Ron, and they're saying, write me a white paper explaining what hashing is and how it works and what we should be using. And they use that white paper to then legislate. That's what a good politician does. Bad politicians sit in a chair all by themselves and attempt to know everything and make every decision based on some narcissistic view of the world that doesn't work. And then they look like putzes. I'm going to
kind of blow your theory out of the water.
Well, I'm out.
She says she understands the principle of end-to-end encryption. It can't be unwrapped. What she's saying is that she wants companies who are developing that to work with us and give her backdoors into that encryption.
That's, I think, completely different. That's
completely different.
Yeah.
That's not understanding technology. That's a very dangerous political
a moral stance on what is allowed and disallowed.
And that's a different group of people writing her a white paper about that. That's a different group of people saying there's an ethical issue here and whether or not you should be doing this. And again, her not knowing the specific difference in those. I mean, she's taking a stand. I don't agree with her stand, but I mean, maybe that's what her experts writing her and saying this,
That's
because
her
we've had
stand
that
on
in the
privacy,
U.S.
probably.
We've had that in the
Doesn't have
U.S.
anything to do with the exact encryption being
Encryption.
used.
Yeah.
That's the Clipper chip stuff in the U.S. was like that, and the NSA was wanting backdoors built into all that technology so that if they wanted to put a warrant on it, they could break the encryption, and it didn't happen. But, you know, I mean, a good politician is going to surround themselves with smart people who are going to tell them what the position is on these different, very diverse issues. Bad politicians just go for it and hope that it all works out.
Yeah.
So Equifax was in the news.
Haven't heard about it. Something about Equifax the past 2 weeks or something like
I
that.
think they make paper bags or
Yeah,
dildos
something
or
like
something.
that.
I'm not sure what their product is.
They got penetrated big time.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Big dildo.
big time.
So many of the C-level executives, including CEO Richard Smith, they were basically all fired. But in the news, some retired, some resigned, some, left.
Took the money and run.
Yeah, but I think that was just a political move by Equifax.
Well, yeah.
However, Richard Smith had to testify in front of a panel in a detailed written testimony. There's YouTube videos of this as well.
Yeah.
That the way I understand the story, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make like Richard Smith look out to be like a complete terrible person, because this situation has happened in most of the major companies in the U.S.
Yep.
All of the enterprise level companies
And the government.
in some way, shape, form, or fashion have had this problem. So I don't blame poor Richard, and I believe he was telling the truth, because hey, look, I worked in vulnerability management for 7 years, and this is consistent with what I saw. He basically said, look, we got a notification in the security group that said Apache Struts had a really heinous vulnerability. Our policy is that when we deem this vulnerability to be critical to our business, that it has to be patched within 48 hours. That I think that's a pretty good policy to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
We think about a major corporation like Equifax, a lot of moving parts. 48 hours is pretty good.
Yeah,
You
that's
can't
quick.
fix this
It's
stuff.
amazingly fast, even I
You
think.
can't fix
Yeah.
this stuff in an hour, right? Like, I've worked with this technology before. This shit isn't fixed in an hour. 2 days are like, it's
And you got to
actually-
study the effects. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen when you do the
That's
fix.
pretty
many
good.
moving
I mean,
parts.
and even in a modern DevOps environment like a Netflix or an Etsy, I mean, they're able to get it down a little more. But even still, I mean, they're going through a
Yeah.
testing. There was a process. All right, so he gets the thing. Apache Struts vulnerable. We got to fix it. Hey, IT, the people responsible for the systems, here's this alert. You got 48 hours to fix it. Now, another week goes by. IT security team does a scan. We don't know what the scanning technology was or some of the details there, but the CEO, Richard Smith, says, hey, we did a scan. Everything came back okay. And so the vulnerability was not remediated by the IT team. The scan to check for that existence of that vulnerability was run. It reported a false negative, and then we got hacked. And that's his story. Now, I don't know if it's true
And he's
or
sticking
not.
to it.
However, in my experience of working in vulnerability management for 7 years, completely plausible.
Absolutely.
In my opinion, completely plausible. It's difficult for organizations, and it was definitely, and still is true to this day, organizations that really understand this problem and are able to overcome all of the challenges, to understand the impact of a vulnerability and react in a way is extremely difficult. There's a very small percentage of organizations that actually do it really well on a consistent basis. And I'm just like, yeah, we see this all the time. What do we do? What do we do to fix it? I mean, obviously, there's a laundry list of things that we could recommend to fix it, right? I think having a better development cycle is one of the things we've talked about. Having a good SCLC, implementing a DevOps style environment where changes can be pushed out much faster. Having a really good way, and this was my life for 7 years, a really good way to say, hey, we know that there's an issue somewhere in our system. We know that maybe we've remediated. We don't know or not, but we've said that remediation should happen. How do we check to ensure that remediation had happened, and do that consistently and accurately is something that, in my experience, a lot of organizations did not do a good job with. I worked for a software company that helped that problem, and the organizations that really embraced that and developed their own systems and processes and tacked onto our software are kind of in the minority. Which is sad.
Right.
Which is sad. Like, what was their scanning technology? I mean,
The other piece of that too is having a good impact assessment that could be done quickly, because you're talking about a massive thing. You're not talking about, like it was a website with a couple of pictures on it. You're talking about a massive piece that's got databases and web presences and customers and all this stuff. And there's a lot of entities that have a vested interest in everything running. Like we keep talking about, the lights need to be on.
Yeah.
The problem is all these different vulnerabilities surface constantly. So you're seeing a vulnerability. You're seeing a vulnerability. And it's difficult, I think, to sit down and quickly say, what is the total impact of this threat?
to do the threat model.
Well, no, I mean, that's what you need to do, but I think it's difficult to
But
do
it's
that.
not just a threat model. It's an impact. Like a
It's a
threat model
severity
is someone
model.
could like break this in this way. Yeah. When you talk about, well, it's not a software flaw in like something we've designed or some theoretical model. Like there's a really easy way or potentially easy way for an attacker to break in. Like how easy is that? How likely is that? How reliable is that? What's the impact and what's the likelihood that this event is going to occur is something that organizations still struggle with today.
I think that a smart organization or a smart
I just
CEO,
ashed right in my laptop. Did you see that?
is it hash proof? Hashtag?
Is it ash proof?
Hashtag. So sorry. Anyway, I think that a smart organization or a smart CEO it would be good for him to be in a state of mind which says, my organization is going to be hacked. It's going to happen sooner or later because there's no such thing as an impenetrable defense. Sooner or later, one vulnerability is going to bite me in the butt, right? What do we do when we're getting penetrated? Is our information secure, encrypted? Assuming that the information is now stolen, completely stolen. So are we keeping the information encrypted correctly that even if it's stolen, the damage is mitigated? What do we do when we get, if the data has been stolen, how do we manage our clients? Can we easily like revoke all passwords, change all the sensitive information, whatever? I think that mindset kind of changes the way a CEO should think, maybe. If I'm thinking like I'm not CEO, thankfully, but if you assume that you're gonna be hacked, then the way you're thinking about the problem is probably going to change. You're looking for different kind of solutions.
One of the other problems that I think we have that we've talked about quite extensively, that I think this is a good lessons learned, is the ability of the security team to communicate that severity. We did episode 143 of Hack Naked News. Faru and Sven Faru is one of the founders of the company of NetSparker, a web application security scanning company. They sponsor our shows and have for some time. Great organization to work with. Obviously, they're a sponsor. I'm biased. Sven is one of their researchers. And in this week's Hack Naked News, we talked about this story. Sven showed 3, like in the span of 10 minutes, demonstrated 3 remote command injection or be able to obtain command shell on the remote Apache Strut server, 3 vulnerabilities successfully exploited in 10 minutes. And now us as security people were like, yeah, like you're running struts, it's so vulnerable, like you guys are screwed. Our ability to take the, like, hey, here are some cool exploits, they're easy to exploit, to be able to explain that to someone like Richard, who's the CEO of Equifax, and go, dude, like we really need to pay attention to this because the impact is so great, I think is also one of the failures. I don't put that on the Richard Smiths of the world. I don't put that on the IT teams of the world. I put some of that on us in our ability to communicate the impact of that.
I call this the evangelism problem. And you see this over and over again.
It's like the cried wolf problem, right?
Well, it's not the cried wolf problem. It's the, say that your company has Sven. And Sven is down there going, Richard, oh my God,
Yeah, like
and
I'm
the
phoning
world
your
is
box
coming
to
to an
6
end.
Sunday.
We've got to fix this or we are screwed.
Right.
And he's able to sell it to this CEO who's another one of these good politician, bad politician people because he's got to surround himself with people. And he's got messages coming in from all over. And all these messages are waving flags going, marketing's in trouble. Our budgets are overrun.
Lots of crying
and
babies around.
IT's saying one of the mainframes is going to go down if we don't replace it. And he's got all these things. And so if he's got Sven who can make that case, evangelize it, it becomes an issue. On the other hand, I'll pick a name out of the hat, Brian. Nobody I know now. But so you have Brian instead of Sven. Brian has the credential. He took the CEH. He took the CCNA. But Brian doesn't really have any skills, but he's got the job because that's who they were able to hire.
I just want to pause for a second.
Okay.
In what I saw, Brian could conceivably like pwn the crap out of Apache Struts.
Well,
but I mean, Sven's a ninja. Sven's a ninja. He's been in the show. I mean, Sven is a total ninja.
Right.
Like my brain works like in overtime when Sven's on the show to keep up.
No, I know.
However, in what Sven showed, I really think Brian could have exploited this. I think the failure could be maybe Sven has better communication skills than Brian.
That's what I'm actually getting to. Is that Sven may be a ninja, but if he's the ninja that sits in the corner during the meeting and goes,
right,
then he doesn't do much good. That's why I call it the evangelism problem. Because Brian, if he's this great salesperson, he may be able to sell even minor things to the CEO as important because you see this happen all the time. And you can get in there and sell this product even if it's not that important. So the issue...
I think... And go back and listen to the episode. Sven's the man in this case because I'm like, Sven, can you describe deserialization bugs for our audience? Because one of the bugs in Struts was deserialization, and it has a history in Java and other frameworks. And he's like, Paul, it's like cake. I'm like, oh, I'm intrigued. He's like, basically, deserialization is when you bake a cake and you got to transport it from point A to point B, like it's dicey. Like it can shift around. Like bad things can happen to your cake. He's like, however, if you understand how to bake the cake, you put the ingredients in these nice, neatly sealed packages. You can deliver that however you want. And when you receive that, you get some instructions on how to bake your cake, and then magically you have a cake.
Smart metaphor.
Isn't that a good? And I'm like the analogy is like I've basically put some poison in some of those ingredients in the cake, and then I can exploit the vulnerability.
See, a person who can do that sells it, and the CEO goes, "Wow, that's bad."
That's bad. Like,
but on the other hand,
cake is bad.
You can have another Sven who's sitting over in the corner going, "I don't know. It's like a bunch of like weird numerical stuff."
I exploit Java deserialization bugs, and I do some
I mean, I tell my forensic students that all the time. I've just never stopped hassling them about you have to write this so people can understand it. You have to sell it. It's not just about how much technical knowledge you have.
Even if you succeed in selling it, still you have to remember that CEO has lots of crime babies around him. I'm not sure.
Yeah, even if you sold it well, right?
Exactly. I mean, this is almost always not the core business of the company. It's not making money. It's a money sink for the company to invest in fixing bugs. I'm not sure that it's even if Sven is doing a great job of selling, he can do it once, he can do it twice.
Well, I'll give you another metaphor.
Equifax has to make money.
I'll give you another metaphor on that makes that. I completely agree. Buildings have been burning down since the first building was ever put up. Some stones caught on fire and the building burned, and the cavemen didn't know what to do. We've spent thousands of years with buildings burning down, and we have fire people who are great, and they're trained, and they make good decisions. Even then, sometimes buildings burn down. And I don't think you're ever going to get security to a world where the ship never gets sunk or the building never burns. You have to make it such that it doesn't burn all the time. That it's just that you save as many as you can, and some of them are still going to burn down. I don't care what you do. There's no way you're ever going to have a security model. It's the same reason people still get robbed on the street. I mean, we've had law enforcement for thousands of years, and somebody still gets a purse snatched down the street tonight.
You have to contain the fire, maybe find other strategies.
And resources. Yeah. So, how much do you dedicate to this? And companies have to make those hard decisions all the time, and you say, well, sometimes there's going to be a building burning, and it's just going to happen.
Even in my tiny little company, whom we make content, right? We have a website.
Yep.
For example, a month ago, I got a mail from Google saying that if I don't change my website to HTTPS, they're going to flag me as insecure from now on. Now, this is serious for me because I want the people who get into my website to get a good experience of a secure website. But transforming my website from HTTP to HTTPS, securing the website,
big deal,
is not my core business. Now I have to stop what I'm doing, stop creating podcasts, and start figuring out how the files behind the scene, the file system, whatever needs to be changed. I can understand why for big companies this is not a viable position.
I want to talk about someone who I read about on the internet. Her name is Sarah. She's a 19-year-old student from Switzerland that created what she calls the hacking station or the spy pie. It was part of her, I believe, high school graduation project that every student is required to do in her program. And she says, I created Spy Pie as part of her graduation work. The motivation behind it was to create a new way of approaching data security. A well-spoken individual who created an awesome hacking tool, fits neatly into a case. It does all kinds of nefarious things on the network and all kinds of tools. There's an open source project associated with it. You can get the list of tools she put on there. And she used it as, and the article kind of takes the thing like, bad people could use this. But Sarah's like, no, I created this to basically like spread the word that bad things can happen to people. So her intentions
were... dilemma of disclosing something or keeping security by obscurity, I think it's So she chose to educate. Valid.
She's her childhood fantasy was to become a hacker and created this awesome device.
What does it do, this device? Do we know?
So it sniffs, it affects the daily life such as payment, social networks, and wireless networks. It has a man-in-the-middle data catcher, an RFID spoofer, and a Twitter data miner to show people just how much information they put it online. She put together several open source tools. It costs about $400 to build on a Raspberry Pi 3.
That's quite a lot, I think, actually. You know what? $400 for a Raspberry Pi plus...
Well, plus a 7-inch mini display, a mouse and keyboard, and an RC522 RFID reader. And she put this together. There's a 70-page documentation, which is written in German for anyone interested, or you consider email for a copy of it.
That's why I never log on to public Wi-Fi because... It's so easy to put a Raspberry Pi behind, like, a pot, a plant, something, and have it broadcast a public Wi-Fi that you can like freely use, and then you pound. So I never use my public networks.
I found this article kind of
McDonald's
browsing
Wi-Fi, and then you
browsing the news feeds a couple days ago, and I thought it was awesome that they were highlighting this project by a high school student. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. You should have her on the show.
Exactly. This is another thing where I'm like, we need to have her on the show. That's great.
Sarah,
come on the show. You're inspiration to a lot of people that want to get into the field. So I think that's really cool. Yeah. I like reading articles like that, certainly, and seeing people do projects like that to raise awareness and do hacking projects. And, we've talked about like having lock picking learning sessions in high school events like we're planning, right? Like, but that's an important thing to teach.
No, it is. I mean, that community stuff, and we keep saying that's how you keep people sort of on the good side of the force is by giving people opportunities to explore things they're interested in safe ways, and the more you know. Right.
Like take a Raspberry Pi and do like a cool project like that has to do with stuff that we do as security professionals. I think it's just
absolutely. It's
awesome.
Great to see young people doing stuff like that.
There were some vulnerable WordPress plugins, which we talked about already. What else? That's really it. There's not much else that's very interesting, to be honest with you.
There was nothing more to be said.
I just want to end on a high note with Sarah, really.
Yeah,
Sarah. That's really
Except
what
for the NSA tools getting stolen by the Russian hackers. just half an hour ago.
Yeah.
No, not too much information about that.
Oh, the Kaspersky article that you mentioned before. Yeah, I mean, that's like a late-breaking story.
Yeah, it just
I
came
did have
out.
it
It
in there.
updated on my
it's
screen.
very interesting to see what they stall and
How
I
they
guess
get it and all
we'll
those
find
good
out
things,
in the next few days. Yeah.
So basically, there was a. So was it exploit tools embedded in Kaspersky software? That I don't.
From what I understand,
That's what the rumor
The
backdoor
Russian
is.
government has copies of the NSA's tools used to exploit vulnerabilities in computer systems that were embedded, exploiting Kaspersky. Is that the?
Maybe that's why the federal government has kind of issued. I think it
Has
was last
banned
week.
it. Yeah, they
Banned Kaspersky
Kaspersky
from
because-
They
being
did.
used.
Yes, we covered that
Best Buy
story.
also has kind of recalled all of the computers
Because they know
installed.
that the U.S. had hacking tools that
Maybe.
took
Tools
advantage
that
of
are- they-
Kaspersky,
yeah.
and the Russians had
Maybe.
gained access
Yep.
to them, and they're like, no, you
I
can't
wouldn't
use
be
Kaspersky.
surprised. I have no
that's good.
knowledge, of course,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't be surprised if the Russian government used Kaspersky's software with or without the corporate agreeing to this move. There's no problem of taking somebody, Russian working employee of Kaspersky, asking him to insert a backdoor into the product. It sounds.
Now, see, we're trying to get Eugene Kaspersky on the show, and this is
He
not
won't
helping
come.
my case either.
I tried to interview him as well. It's very difficult now. Although we did get
Patrick
one
Gray
of
from
his,
Risky
securities
Business
receipts.
did an interview with Eugene Kaspersky. I believe, had to travel to Russia to do it. Put a lot of effort into that. I'm very
I
thankful
would
that
travel
he.
to Russia.
Yeah, I'll go. We're there.
That we're there. But Patrick did a great job in getting that interview. That was a lot of work on his part.
And I guess
we both we know
Eugene Kaspersky
podcast people getting people on the show is very
is
hard.
difficult.
Yes.
Yeah, and I guess that Eugene Kaspersky denies everything categorically. I haven't checked it, but I'm guessing that he denies everything. Else it would be suicide, business
To
suicide.
admit, why would he admit anything?
Of course.
Yeah, that means he's not coming on the show anytime soon.
Not with this attitude, he won't.
Okay, cue up the
What
Russian
about
national
Woz?
anthem.
Woz will come on the show. Woz we have a chance with. Because we said
He's
nothing but
hopping
nice things
between
about
cities
Woz.
all the time.
But, and how can
Catch
you
him in
say,
flight.
But how could you possibly say anything bad about Woz, to be
No,
honest
he's
with
such
you?
a
Like, I
great
don't
guy.
think I've ever heard anyone
love
say
him.
anything bad about Woz in my entire life.
No, he's one of the few, but
Yeah.
he's definitely never. I don't. So we
We
love
just need
you.
to catch up with him. That's all.
Yeah,
The other people, Alex Stamos, Eugene Kaspersky, based on this episode.
Snowden, all those guys. Yeah.
Snowden probably would come on the show.
Hey,
I mean, I don't think we've said
Via Skype.
anything really bad about
Our bookers are standing
not
by.
in studio. He's not coming to the U.S., dude. Like, no friggin' way. But remotely, we could probably
Yeah,
get
where is
get
he
Snowden
now?
on
Where
the
is he
show.
hiding?
Is it Russia?
Moscow, I
Is it
think,
Russia?
right?
He's
He's
back
in
in Russia again?
Yeah, he's in
Yeah.
Russia. Yeah. He did do a Skype thing at the end of 0 Days.
Yeah.
He was like,
Yeah.
was that live footage from an actual event where he was on
Probably
via Skype?
it goes
Yeah.
live all the time via Skype.
Yeah.
Via Skype.
Lots of events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not leaving Russia, though, or wherever he's
He's never going to leave Russia.
Yeah, when he comes back, he would never.
He
Why
gets
would
all those
you do that?
free
should learn
trip
Russian.
contest winning things from the U.S. all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, you want a free all expenses paid trip to Disneyland, DEF CON, see
Yeah.
beautiful Vegas.
No, that's not happening.
Nah, it's not happening.
Well, thank you, Ron, for
It's
coming
been a
on the
pleasure.
show.
Thank
It's
you
been
very much.
so much fun. Doug,
good.
thanks for coming in.
Thank you for putting me in the
participating in the
James
show.
Bond villain chair.
You
I just
got the
need
James Bond villain chair.
a white cat to
It's
pet.
been a-
And
I
I'm
expect you to die, Mr. Bonds.
Yes. Thanks, everyone, for listening and watching to Paul's Security Weekly. Over and out.